Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Enter the Ether, the podcast all about the upcoming third-person Moba Ethereal Clash of Souls, which is not a Paragon successor. I'm your host, the Mangoose. Joining me, as always, is JellyKnees himself. What's up, Jelly?
What? JellyKnees himself.
That's right.
All right. I'm changing all of my socials to JellyKnees from now on. That's just how it is.
Oh, I should have introduced myself.
To be here.
Self as Jam Elbows. That's how I should have introduced myself. Oh, you froze up.
Uh-oh, I'm back.
Hey, there he is. So how you been? How you doing this week?
I am fantastic, Mangoose. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. A little jazzed up right now, like I said earlier.
Hey.
So what we're going to be talking about this week is the Paragon fan base. Where are they coming from? Because obviously, as I mentioned, Paragon was never meant to be Ethereal was never meant to be a Paragon successor. Jelly was ready. Jelly was ready. He was
actually.
Ready. Oh yeah, you watch that too? I love that show. but yeah, interrupt me at any time.
Oh, in that case, Mangoose, I'm taking over the show. Get out of here. This
Go
is
for
now
it.
the JellyKnees show.
Go
Sorry,
for it.
JellyKnizzle show. But yeah, absolutely. Ethereal's player base comes from all over, right?
Yeah.
The people that are excited for the game. Sure, there is a lot of people coming from Paragon, but that's any of the Parazombies. Even though Ethereal isn't one, it kind of cropped up at the similar timing as the rest of them. So it makes sense that a lot of Paragon refugees are there. It's also a third-person MOBA, so you get that extension as well. But we've got a lot of different people. Like even the UG team, there are members of the UG team that never played Paragon. They're MOBA players from a different genre. So it's all over the place. There's different kinds of people all throughout Ethereal's development and the community and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, the founding fathers of Undying never played a Paragon, from what I understand. The Noxus, Kai, and Owen?
Yeah, absolutely. The three of them never played Paragon, which blows my mind.
I know, right?
They decided to go 3D MOBA as the choice.
And not only that, like, when I was talking to Owen about Paragon, why not Paragon? God damn, I keep saying Paragon. When I was talking to Owen about Ethereal, you really need to jump in and interrupt me.
I will.
When I was talking to Owen about Ethereal a long ass time ago, what he was saying was the idea was they would watch like all these League of Legends trailers, see how awesome those trailers looked, and then you play the game and it looks nothing like the trailer. So that's what he wanted to recreate. He wanted to create a MOBA that looked like the trailer. That's exactly what Steve Superville said when he was asked about Paragon. So it's just a good example of parallel thinking. You know, great minds think alike. They both thought of that sort of concept, and that's what they're going with. But yeah, Ethereal was in development well before I wouldn't say well before, but months before even the announcement of the closure of Paragon came around. So yeah, Ethereal is not a Paragon successor. It just happened to pick up a lot of para-refugees with the third-person MOBA appeal.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the big thing is if you even look at our cinematic, the main section of the cinematic where you see like the action going on, it being that third part, is all things you can actually do in game, right? It was a big thing for me in creating that to make sure that everything that we see here is actually possible. There wasn't super heavy scripting. There wasn't super heavy anything else. It was a like, could someone reasonably walk up to the edge of Ice Lane and fire down toward the obelisk and kill a Talos with Dante Ultimate?
Right.
Absolutely. Right? All the things in there were things that could happen in your everyday game without needing to do extra things to make them happen.
Now that I think of it, like looking back and you look at the sort of older League of Legends cinematics, that's kind of what the original character models looked like, huh? Like the original Kalia, the original Malaya. They kind of were,
I guess a little bit. Yeah,
like
they more matched that.
They matched that more than what they look like now. Like what they look like now matches, it's not Paragon. Like it's not that high level of fidelity. It still has a lot of influence from other games that makes it a little less realistic, but I think a little cooler in my opinion. I mean, that's of course my opinion. A lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I think I like the Ethereal models better than the Paragon models. Hot take right there. But yeah, it's more of a Final Fantasy inspired thing. But when they started, you had that Malaya and the Kalia, and they looked very anime and cartoonish. And if you look at those old League of Legends, they don't look strictly anime and cartoonish, but the old ethereal models look quite a bit like that, quite a bit more like that than what they do now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point there, Mangoose, of the kind of style of everything being created. Like Final Fantasy, I think is the perfect way to put that, because it's that mostly realism, but still has that kind of artsy side to it as well. And it's a good dynamic. And I would actually agree with you that I prefer this aesthetic to the Paragon aesthetic. So you and I are pissing off a whole bunch of people today.
Yay! This is going on your channel, right?
Oh God. But yeah, so I think the big thing, you ran a poll, and I know UG ran several polls as well, of like where players are coming from, what MOBAs they're coming from leading into Ethereal's pre-alpha release. So kind of talk to us about what you're seeing on your channel in terms of those results. Granted, they're still early on, but
I mean, you do have to bear in mind with my channel that most of my subscribers are coming from Paragon. So I've got Paragon at 81%, Smite at 11%, okay, League of Legends at 5%, Dota at 1%, and other at 1%. So Paragon with a huge lead, but that's my channel. So you would kind of expect that. I'm actually surprised that it's not higher.
And from the UG side of things, we're seeing a lot of Paragon. Most of the polls are saying that Paragon was the preference. But as well, we're seeing League of Legends usually in second place on most of the polls. And then depending on which medium the poll is on, you'll see Smite kind of be a close third to that as well. And I mean, that makes sense. It tracks that you've got League of Legends, which is one of the, if not the biggest MOBA in the world. Makes sense that a lot of players are coming from that. Got the Paragon Refugees, absolutely makes sense as well there. And then Smite being the only other third-person MOBA that people really play, makes sense that that's the third highest of the three kind of MOBAs that we know about and talk about a lot.
Right. And your numbers were a lot closer than mine. Like,
yeah,
like
we're seeing
closer.
Like 40% Paragon, 15% League, 15% Smite, and then a scattering of the rest.
Yeah. So I think that's probably far more accurate, the poll that you guys ran as opposed to the poll that I ran. And this all kind of came about. I did the Fault Partners panel that I guess I'm a permanent installment on with on the Bearded Wolverine's Twitch channel. Windu Mace runs it on his YouTube, and it kind of came about because somehow player bases got brought up, and then somehow Ethereal got brought up, and they always kind of just defer to me as the Ethereal expert, which I used to be, and then the fucking student over here became the master real goddamn quick.
I mean, a little bit, man.
Once upon a time, I was the Ethereal guy, and then came Jelly. But, yeah,
when I was just a baby knees.
But we were talking about how the Paragon successors are drawing only from. I mean, they're drawing a little bit from the other pools, from the League of Legends and the Dota and the Smite, just like a little tiny bit. But it's almost predominantly Para-Refugees, of course, because it's a Paragon successor project. But we were also talking about how, that's divided between Fault, Predecessor, and Overprime. So even they're drawing from a smaller base of people, and they're it's split into thirds. And kind of the thing we were talking about was initially they're going to get more of a draw because the Paragon fish in that pond are hungry for something. But they're all fishing from this one pond, while Ethereal is still catching fish from that pond, but they're also out in the lake. I'm not going to say the ocean because MOBA games are not the ocean. Battle Royales are the fucking ocean right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just the rivers that lead into those.
Yeah.
But you're right, absolutely. And even with the Paragon fan base, you're also split. The community itself is kind of split with the pre-monolith and post-monolith players.
Yes, yeah.
So not only do you have the 3 different games vying for attention, you also have 2 different sections of the fan base that those 3 games have to divvy up, essentially. And that's the crazy thing. And I think for the most part, Overprime appeals more to the monolith players, and Fault and Pred are trying to seek out more the pre-monolith players. But you're still going to have that issue of splitting them even further from that.
Right.
But that's a big thing for Ethereal is, for us, we talk about a lot of, yes, while Paragon players are great and we're happy to have had those refugees come to the project, pulling away from like Smite, because Smite players do nothing but talk about how terrible their game is. It's like, here is a new game that isn't one that has already tried to succeed and failed, for lack of a better way to put it. Right? Here's a new game that you can try that's in the third-person perspective. It's kind of in the middle between what Paragon was and what Smite is, and just trying to kind of pull from all those avenues as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I've said this since the very beginning, that Ethereal has more of an opportunity to pull a larger player base and to continue to grow over than the Paragon successor strictly, because that pool's going to dry up. Like, it's going to run out, and then they got to start pulling from League of Legends and Dota and Smite. And I'm sure that's something they're thinking about, but Undying Games is already thinking about it, and they're already acting on it. They've got a head start.
And I think that's not one of the nice things as well, is we're not, the devs themselves for Ethereal are not strictly Paragon refugees, right? Like you said, Owen, Kai, and Noxus never played Paragon, which I think is a good starting point, because that means that you're not just trying to recreate something or pull players from this one thing. You've got a lot of League of Legends players on the dev team. So they're going to design the game in such a way for the things they enjoy about League, but in a 3D MOBA space for Ethereal. You have Smite players on the dev team. Same thing. You can pull the good pieces of Smite that we really like and kind of develop them into Ethereal and get this game that has really good things from each one that draws players from all three avenues at the same time.
Right. Then you do have the Paragon refugees like you working in there, so you know what works and what doesn't work in this 3D MOBA space. Like, you know not to design Wukong. They may not know that, but you know.
Absolutely.
You know that designing a highly elusive split push monster is probably a bad idea for a MOBA.
You know what I also know, Mangoose? That Box Grux needs to make an appearance again somewhere.
I want Box Malaya with her claws sticking out the side. That's
Perfect.
what I want.
All right.
I want a
10%,
box.
10%. We take
face
10%.
right on the front and just claws out the side. Just. She's got to make that noise too.
Perfect.
A square puffer fish. I like that.
But that's a big thing, and I think that shows, we've seen in the polls for UG especially, that is what's happening, is you're getting players from these other MOBAs to come in and play the game. Even I was surprised to see that Heroes of the Storm was getting more votes than a game like Dota 2.
Was it really? I didn't even think to put Heroes on there. We have,
I think Heroes of the Storm had like 5 or 6% of the votes on most of the platforms we put the poll out on. So that's a considerable thing that you're pulling. Dota 2 arguably being the second biggest MOBA on the planet, having a lesser draw than a Heroes of the Storm type surprised me a little bit in seeing those results.
That is nuts. Yeah. I mean, I kind of, by roundabout way, came from Heroes of the Storm because that's where I started, then went to Paragon. Huh. That's crazy. Man, I didn't even think to put, I mean, I couldn't. I ran out of slots. It was either other or something else, and I didn't even think of putting Heroes of the Storm on there. Huh, that's crazy.
But overall, it's exciting to see, I think, for me, looking at that, because I internally always had the feeling of like, we've got a lot more Paragon refugees than I think we realize, right? And putting out these polls gave me a little bit better perspective of like, oh, we actually do pull from a good chunk of different MOBAs and a good chunk of players from those different MOBAs as well.
That's the way to go. Why do you think these other Paragon successor I say other, but why do you think the Paragon successor projects aren't drawing as much? Maybe they are. Maybe we just don't know. Maybe they are drawing from Smite and League of Legends and Dota, but when I'm in the Discord for Ethereal, I see a wide range of players from different games. I never see that in like Fault Discord or Pred Discord or the Overprime. I don't even get on the Overprime Discord anymore. But like you always saw old like para refugees. That's all you ever saw. You never saw somebody brand new coming in from like Dota or some shit. You see that in the Ethereal Discord.
I think really what it comes down to is Paragon was designed in such a way, and I think that was part of Paragon's struggle throughout its entire life of development, was pulling players from the other MOBAs. It wasn't the fact that the game itself wasn't good, but when you're coming from any of the other MOBAs, that is a huge shift in separation from what those other MOBAs do, even Smite being another third-person MOBA. And so I think part of the benefit for Ethereal is Paragon paved that path, but couldn't draw the people for it. Whereas now Ethereal is using that path that's already been paved and using it to draw the other MOBAs in as well. Right. So it's using... Steve Superville did the hard work for us, essentially, in creating a third-person MOBA that was so outlandish that people were curious enough about it, but also scared enough at the same time, that since its death has probably gotten nothing but bigger, funny enough, because of the amount of people talking about it, talking about the successor projects, all those things. I mean, we talked about before we started shooting Mangoose, this Akshan Gaming or whatever they were, making a video about Paragon 5 days ago, right? This game's been dead for several years, and this essentially new channel to the community, at least, of Paragon refugees is out there creating content, talking about it, getting it to a wider audience, getting it to these people that may not have known about it before. So I think that's where Ethereal benefits, is essentially from Paragon's downfall. Yeah. And I think that's something that the Parazombies will struggle with, is how do you get out of Paragon's limelight? How do you become your own entity that doesn't get compared to them all the time as a direct successor? Yeah.
And that's something we were talking about before the show started. The Action Esports, they did a great video on the rise, fall, and rebirth of Paragon, I think it's called. But during the video, they had a few things wrong. And one of the things they said that Ethereal was a Paragon successor. They were like, Fault, predecessor, and Ethereal or something like that. And I'm like, no, Ethereal was never meant to be.
Nope. And that's
good that Ethereal's name's getting out there, but
yeah, I mean, I'm stoked about it. But I think that's another thing, is there is definitely a presence in the community of people that are almost upset that these Parazombies are using the Paragon assets, because it feels like you're not doing the work, but you're getting to reap the rewards.
Oh, yeah. And
that isn't a thing in Ethereal. Now, granted, Ethereal also has the opposite problem of everyone comparing Paragon's assets to ours. But it's... people look at that and say, like, no, these guys are using that space that Paragon made, but doing their own thing. They're creating their own opportunity. They're not relying on the opportunity that was created for them by Epic Games. Because I've definitely seen in the comments of the Ethereal YouTube videos, people talking about that, people mentioning that, like, these guys are doing everything themselves. They're going out, they're trying to recreate something entirely new. They're not recreating something old that's already been done before.
That's another thing I seem to remember talking about on the partners panel. Like I've said, I get pretty lit for those. Like I prep drink for those, but so I don't
You're always... here first. Mangoose does not need to prep drink for this. No, but he does need to prep drink for partner panel.
But yeah, I seem to remember talking about like how much it pisses me off about how they're all the Paragon successor projects whine about how hard it is to use to integrate the Paragon assets into the game. And it is hard. Like Ruba showed me what it takes, what it entails. But you know what's harder than that is designing the character from the fucking ground up and creating a 3D model and animations, because all that shit's already done for the Paragon successors. Like, sure, it's hard to put those into a game and make them work when you're brand new, but Ethereal and Visionary was doing a great job of it before they went down. They're designing from the ground up and doing all of that work themselves. Like, that's a lot of work. That's an entire department that these other games don't have to worry about.
Absolutely. And to an extent, it gives Ethereal an edge in this 3D MOBA space now, because when the time comes for these parazombies to develop their own characters and create their own models, because if they want to survive, they're going to have to do that. Like, there's just no question about it. When that time comes, Ethereal will have been doing it for years, and they'll just be starting out on that train. They'll just be fleshing out those departments, just be doing all of those things. That's going to be more difficult for them to transition out of, because I have no doubt that it's similar in the workload for the people they already have, because it's just taking the model, adding the animations, adding the abilities and all of that. But the ground up aspect of choosing what the character looks like, what the kits look like, not just tweaking the kits anymore. Now you have to fully design abilities from the ground up. You have to look at your systems and do all of those things. That's going to be harder for these Paragon successors that have a couple years worth of content before they get to that point.
And the using those assets are very limiting, as we've seen with the concept art for the hero that you guys said would possibly be after the first 15, I guess, heroes that we've already seen, would be that quadruped ranged phase dog Chronicles of Riddick Cat thing. And like, so you guys aren't limited to humanoid characters. That was a huge thing with Paragon fans. Everybody was screaming for something like that, some kind of bestial character. Like, you had Grux, but he was still kind of humanoid. You had Iggy and Scorch, but he was a humanoid riding on a
Rampage
thing.
Was really the closest we got to an actual quadruped.
Yeah.
And even then, Rampage was more like a gorilla in that he used his front hands to help himself position. But he was mostly walking on his hind legs.
Yeah, in fights, he was just basically a humanoid.
Yeah. And there were those teasers prior to Paragon's death that came out about they were having a spider hero that was in the works.
Hatch.
That never happened.
Yeah.
But that would have probably been the closest we got to some kind of non-humanoid character, but it never happened.
Never happened.
And the assets aren't out there. It's not like Boris, where he was done enough to give it the assets. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because while yes, we already have that quadruped in the list of things, there are other myths in the background as well that explore similar ideas to.
Oh, I lost you again.
That's different than everything else and all of those things.
Okay, right on. I lost you for a second there, buddy. Yeah. Well, I think I've exhausted everything I had to say about the topic. Unless you got anything else you wanted to add.
No, nothing comes to mind right now.
Okay. All right. Well, anything you want to plug?
Ethereal's Patreon. We've started doing more posts. The first poll has gone out for people that are on the Patreon. There's plenty more content where that has come from as well. So yeah, the Ethereal Patreon. But that's it for me. What about you, Mangoose? Anything to plug?
Ethereal Patreon. I'm a patron myself, so big good times. Yeah, that's about all I had to plug. Yeah, fun show this week. I think that was a pretty damn interesting conversation. Again, we pulled this out of our ass like usual, but
what are you talking about, Mangoose? These are the most well thought out concepts before we get into them.
But whether you're a Paragon refugee, whether you're coming from Smite, Dota, LoL, or Heroes of the Storm, we don't really care. You're all welcome to join us as we enter the ether.